We're going to wrap up last but not least with the most important protocol update that you're going to hear during the next 2.5 days. I am talking about the latest and greatest in Bitcoin. As Bitcoin goes, so goes crypto, whether you like it or not. And we have two of the best and most important folks that are working full time on improving Bitcoin day in, day out. I'm talking about Elizabeth Stark from Lightning Labs and Neha Narula from the Digital Currency Initiative at MIT's Media Lab.
Awesome, thanks so much. By the way, I was really excited to see the SegWit support and the Lightning node in the ad that preceded this from Bitstamp. So definitely supporting Bitcoin protocol stuff. So Neha, it's great to see you virtually. I miss you. And I think it's incredible. You know, we met many, many years ago in Cambridge, but really reunited through our mutual passion for Bitcoin.
Yeah, totally. I remember meeting you in San Francisco at a vegan restaurant, of course, because that's the only place you would eat. And you guys were talking about this thing called Lightning that I was just learning about, and it sounded really interesting. And I think one of you said something like, "Are you sure you want to get into this? It's a little hard to deal with sometimes." But I'm really excited to be doing this update with you today, Elizabeth. I also just wanted to say really quickly, and I'm sure you'd agree, these are open source, unowned protocols. I am not a representative for Bitcoin in any way. I'm just here to share a little bit about what I've seen happening in the repository and on the mailing list and things like that. Do you want to say anything about that, Elizabeth?
Yeah, similarly, Lightning Network itself is an open source protocol, and I'm working on one implementation with the community, but at the end of the day, these are open source communities for sure.
Yeah.
So I think the format we're going with is somewhat of a back-to-back. People know in like the DJ world, you have one DJ then the other. So I'm going to start with Neha on Bitcoin 2020 plus, what the future holds, what the next decade holds. And first, I want to start with the protocol. I know you've been very actively involved with the community via MIT DCI. You've been doing research, working with core developers. So what do you see as the outlook for the Bitcoin protocol over the next few years?
Yeah, definitely. So again, I'm sharing my take here because there is no one who could definitively tell you what's going to launch in the next 10 years. It is definitely not ruled by committee. So I think that there are really 4 key areas to think about when you think about what's happening in Bitcoin Core and what kinds of updates are being made. I've been listening along this morning. It's been a lot about Bitcoin as an asset and digital currency as an asset class. Now we're going to talk about it as a technology, which is what it was originally and what it always will be and what the asset class depends on. So I think the key thing to remember with Bitcoin is that they're always trying to improve sort of 4 key areas. Better privacy, which makes it harder to censor transactions. Better performance, which makes it easier to run a full node and therefore makes the network more decentralized. Better robustness, making it harder to attack in general. And then functionality. And in terms of functionality, I think that from what I've seen, people are they want to know exactly what's going to be used. So it's not just about adding functionality for functionality's sake. It's about what do the companies that build on Bitcoin really need. And just shout out to Bitcoin OpTech. If you want to learn a lot more in a lot more detail about what's going on with Bitcoin, I suggest you subscribe to Bitcoin OpTech. It's a great newsletter that keeps track of what's going on. So another big part of the philosophy, I think, and something that's driving a lot of the new functionality changes is we really need to minimize what goes on chain. So this is in pretty stark contrast to a lot of smart contract platforms, which execute every step of every smart contract on chain. It's like you take the program you want to run, you put the whole thing on the chain. Bitcoin's going for a slightly different approach. That approach is let's do as little on chain as possible. This helps.
And by the way, where did this originate from? Like, would you say Satoshi had some of these ideas, removing opcodes and things like that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think whoever designed Bitcoin script was definitely thinking a lot about this. And I think it just comes from the fact that you realize, a blockchain is replicated across thousands of nodes and hopefully one day millions, if not billions of nodes. You can't execute everything that way. You've got to be really careful. You've really got to think about what needs to go on chain. It's very expensive storage, compute, and memory usage to put a program on chain to run it. So I think that's part of the ethos. And so that's where we see things like Taproot Schnorr. So you've probably heard a lot about Taproot Schnorr. Peter Wohl has has implemented it and has a couple bits out.
By the way, for those that don't know, briefly, what are they?
Yeah, sure, definitely. So Schnorr is an upgrade to the signature algorithm. It's using a new signature algorithm, and this one has really nice properties that help with privacy and performance. You can do things like aggregate signatures. And then Taproot is a really cool way of embedding smart contract functionality into transactions. The really neat thing about Taproot is that they look just like regular transactions. They don't look like fancy, complicated multi-sigs or covenants or vaults or whatever you're doing. They just look like regular transactions. And if things go as planned, that's all they'll ever look like. You can't even tell that there's some kind of complicated, contingency happening here. So that's really cool. So it's an upgrade to Bitcoin scripting system. You've probably been hearing about them since last year, and you'll probably hear about them all during this year because Bitcoin development is a little slow. But the reason is because there's nobody in charge, and people care a lot about robustness, and they really care about doing good code review and making sure that this stuff is solid before it gets in.
So I want to dig a little deeper into this design philosophy of Bitcoin and, taking things off the chain or not putting everything on chain. Can you talk a little bit about how the philosophy that you see in the community embodies that, recognizing that nobody's in charge?
Yeah, so just from what I've seen, I think that the philosophy is really, if you're thinking internet, then think like a very layered approach. And that's why this session is so apt, because we're talking about the two different layers here, right? So the base chain needs to be as simple as possible and needs to have the hooks necessary to support higher level functionality. That's the idea. I don't want to call it a dumb network because Bitcoin's definitely not dumb. It's designed really well.
That is a term that was used to refer to the base layer of the internet, not meaning it's stupid, but actually that you don't have the complexity in the middle of the network.
Exactly. Yeah. And the thing is, like, we're building Bitcoin to be around for, centuries, right? And the idea here is that you put as little as possible into that base layer. You don't want to evolve the base layer. You don't want to be constantly rewriting the base layer. You want to have a base layer that is really, really robust. And something that we've seen a lot is complexity is really the enemy of security. If you have a very complicated protocol, if you have really complicated functionality, guess what? That's a huge attack surface. And the whole point of this technology, is to be secure. We are removing the trusted third party. We are relying on cryptography and software. And so that really needs to be secure. And sometimes I think people just do not take that seriously enough.
Yeah, so let's dive a little bit into security. So I know you've been doing a lot of research related to mining. We just had the halving happen not too long ago. What are we seeing in terms of the latest research with security and mining?
Yeah, so we had a halving, and what was great about the halving is it was pretty uneventful. It went the way it was supposed to, which is kind of incredible that we have this many billions, do people realize this? We have this industry where people are making billions of dollars and they just voluntarily cut their earnings in half because the computer code told them to. I think that's amazing.
When I reached out to friends in the mining world, I said, how are you guys doing? And they said, well, the revenue drop wasn't great. And I said, well, at least it was predicted. So, you knew it was going to happen.
You should be ready for that. But it's kind of amazing, right? It's kind of amazing that it worked, that this actually happened. We have been looking into proof of work security a lot. We're at the DCI. I don't know if that's a general update on Bitcoin, but I think, we don't really fully understand proof of work security as much as we should. There's a lot of people here talking about mainstream adoption and institutional investors. And everyone takes it for granted that because Bitcoin's been working for the last 10 years, that it's all a done deal, that everything's just going to continue working. And I think we forget we had an inflation bug in Bitcoin for 18 months, right? And that's not something to be embarrassed about. That happens. That is inevitable. Software has bugs, but we are building software that is supposed to run for a very long time. And, if there's anything that I can tell people about today, it's to sort of tell them about this philosophy, this mindset of trying to build software that is super robust. And that's some of the interesting things that have been happening in Bitcoin development too. Like one big change is removing code. They removed OpenSSL, which is a library for a lot of cryptographic functions. And this was super celebrated because a third-party library is a source of bugs. It's a source of potential consensus failure. People might have different versions on their machines. And so removing this was a huge win, actually. It makes the network more secure.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned institutions getting involved, the concept of mainstream adoption. What do you see as mainstream adoption for Bitcoin, over the next couple of years and decade to come?
Yeah, definitely. You and I were talking about this, Elizabeth. Everybody on Twitter was talking about the Goldman Sachs report on Bitcoin, right? And I think, we forget mainstream adoption doesn't mean institutional adoption. It doesn't mean a bunch of really wealthy people holding Bitcoin as an asset to protect their wealth. That's not what mainstream adoption means. Mainstream adoption to me means that people, everyday people, are actually using this network, whether that's holding because it's part of their savings, or whether that's using the Lightning Network to make payments, or whether it's building things that are on top of Bitcoin. And that's mainstream adoption to me, is real people, not just institutional investors, not just replicating Wall Street all over again on a crypto network.
And in the last week, this Goldman Sachs report came out, and it's been a busy week, and obviously a lot's going on in the world. But saw people on Twitter responding and being really upset. And I was thinking, like, who cares? Like, yeah. I don't care. I mean, do you care?
No, not at all. Like, if Goldman Sachs likes it, that means we're doing something. I think that means we're doing something wrong. They should not like Bitcoin.
If we're in this for mainstream financial institutions to kind of, approve of what we're doing, yeah, we're not doing this right.
Yeah, we don't want Jamie Dimon saying Bitcoin's great. Like, I understand people want number to go up, but you got to be in this for the long term. You have to think about what this really is and what kind of value it really has. And it's not just about pumping an asset. And I think you and I both feel very strongly about this. We care a lot about Bitcoin and what it potentially means, and what we can do with it. So yeah. So should we?
Wait, I have one final question for you. And this is a subject that we're both very passionate about, but in terms of the open source developer community and funding that community, we've seen a whole host of other protocols have 30 million, 100 million, I mean, tons and tons of developer funding money, and Bitcoin had no pre-mine. It's structured differently. Things are much more ad hoc. Obviously, the DCI is involved with donors in funding core developers. But what do you see as the needs for the community moving forward and ensuring that the free and open source software development can continue, and that it is open source and it is decentralized?
Yeah, I think this is, you could see this as a tragedy of the commons, but I don't see this as a tragedy of the commons, because I think the really sophisticated hodlers realize that they have to give back to the network to protect their asset. And I think the really sophisticated institutions see this as well. They realize, if I'm building my business on this technology, then I have to be, contribute. It's like the Linux open source kernel. It's like Red Hat. It's like IBM. If you're building on open source technology, you need to contribute back to making sure that that open source technology is robust. And it's more important than ever with things like cryptocurrencies. There's a lot of money that is based on Bitcoin continuing. And when I see things like developers who just want to work on Bitcoin Core, and they are, trying to sort of year to year find funding in order to do that. And that's a really scary situation. And I think institutional investors are not going to be comfortable investing in a technology that doesn't sort of have this act together. There was no token sale. There's no foundation. There is no sort of central body with hundreds of millions of dollars that is supporting Bitcoin. I think that's, that doesn't exist. When you see the people who are actually doing the work and who are putting in the effort, there's only a few institutions. In addition to us, it's also Square Crypto, Chaincode, Blockstream, Digital Garage, who have been supporting developers, Zappo, Coinbase a little bit. So
BitMEX.
But we really need more. Sorry, what?
BitMEX Research.
BitMEX, of course. BitMEX has been doing a ton to support Bitcoin development, because I think, like I said, I think the sophisticated companies realize that this is really important to their success. Awesome. And I know you've really worked hard on this too, Elizabeth.
This is an area that I'm really passionate about, and definitely have some ideas in the works and potential projects for the future. Should we flip it over, Neha?
Let's talk about Lightning. Yeah. So I think
layer 1 to layer 2.
Yeah, layer 1 to layer 2. So like we were saying, I think it takes, like, where I'm really interested in the applications that people are going to build on top of Bitcoin. And, Bitcoin needs to be the secure layer, but you're the one, you're leading it, like one of the major companies who's building the actual infrastructure to make Lightning work. And so the first thing I wanted to ask you was, do you have everything you need at the base layer? Do you need more out of Bitcoin or not? How is that developing? How's that going?
Well, yeah, I think that's a great question, especially looking at the evolution of Lightning as a technology. So in the early days, so Lightning Lab started in 2016, the original paper came out in 2015, and there were 3 major soft forks that were needed for Lightning as proposed. CLTV, CSV, and SegWit. Segregated witness, which was cool that it was in the ad before us, was the most well-known and also the most contentious of those changes in soft forks. And we can get into Bitcoin history another time, but those all happened. And to me, those were the kind of the 3 most important changes that really enabled Lightning to function. So we got those, which is great. And there were times where we were like, is SegWit going to activate? And being in the Bitcoin community, never dull. Always a lot of excitement. So we saw that. Today, there are some interesting, so Schnorr actually has quite a few benefits when it comes to Lightning. You can have greater privacy. I know that's something that you're passionate about as well, and we talked about it at the base layer, but in terms of certain, say, channel opens and then cooperative channel closes, those can actually be not distinguishable using Schnorr. So that's significant. There are also some related potential transaction cost savings. Things like fee estimation could be improved. And then there's a proposed change which is still in discussion amongst the community around no input that can aid with things like channel factories for those that aren't familiar, a way for you to effectively enter and exit channels without having to go to the base layer each time, so enabling better scalability for Lightning itself. There are protocols like L2 that I know Blockstream has been very involved in, and our CTO Lalo was also helping out on the paper that could be better enabled, enabling efficiency and space savings on Lightning, especially with technologies like watchtowers. So basically, we're in a position right now where we have what we need, but there are improvements that would be helpful. But luckily, they're not going to block us from building what we need today. I know that there are also lots of debates internally as to when these changes will be proposed or activated. But I would say at the end of the day, our goal is let's build for the real use cases. Let's build for the users, the enthusiasts, the startups, the companies that are integrating this technology. And then hopefully we'll see improvements that will, on the base layer, that will only help the second layer moving forward.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about that. I just wanted to make a quick comment, which is something that I've been noticing in Bitcoin Core development as well, is a lot of changes that make closing channels happen more robustly. So basically things with fees, making sure stuff gets propagated, making sure channel closes get propagated on the network, making sure that they are don't get kicked out of the mempool. Basically, realizing that liveness and availability, getting your transaction on the chain is very important for layer 2 technology. So there have been improvements at the core layer.
And one really interesting point. So in the early days when the community was talking about Lightning, they said, will Lightning obviate the need for the base layer? Which is funny because actually Lightning couldn't exist without the base layer. But actually it's the opposite, because you need on-chain fees for channel open, channel closes, but then we're now seeing this whole host of layer 2 financial products, things like submarine swaps. So at Lightning Labs, we have a product called Loop, a liquidity product that uses submarine swap technology, enabling you to non-custodially go from on-chain to off-chain and from off-chain to on-chain. And then I know of a variety of other technologies that are these layer 2 financial products that actually use the base layer, as the anchor, as does Lightning. Yeah. Lightning is only as secure as a base layer under it. So if I made Stark Chain and then I had Lightning on Stark Chain and I controlled 100% of it, well, Lightning on Stark Chain wouldn't be secure. That'd be a cool chain. But
so tell me more about that. Tell me more about the actual apps that people are building. Like, what are you seeing? And what are some real use cases, real problems, real stuff? Like, what are people using Lightning for today?
Totally, totally. So one thing that's actually been pretty exciting and surprising is in the 2 years since Lightning has been available on Mainnet for Bitcoin, we've seen a whole host of open source projects and also companies building on top of this. So they come from a variety of different categories. So there's a whole set of hardware projects and companies. Then you have payments, everything from payment processing, a lot of international uses, Fold, Bitrefill, OpenNode, ways for end users to pay with Lightning. You have the ability to earn sats with Lightning, sats back. There's a whole stacking sats meme. There's a company called Stack. Fold has some cool rewards back. I know, for example, companies like Lolly are interested in Lightning, and we're definitely in touch with them around earning Bitcoin back. So that's a really interesting example because, if you think of traditional, say, credit card networks, there's only one way, you pay. But you don't receive with Visa. And Lightning enables people to both send and receive. There's also the world of tipping and earning money, say, if you're an artist or creator, and we've seen tip-in. Bottle, I know they were previously custodial, and now they're working on some new endeavors around tipping. So that's another way to earn. We've also seen the emergence of Lightning financial products. What I call LiFi, not DeFi, but LiFi. So there's everything from River to a variety of exchanges that have integrated Lightning deposits and withdrawals. There's a company out there called LN Markets, which is new, where they have this concept of what I call transient custody. So you send in a Lightning transaction, and then the exchange only has that transiently while you execute a trade, and then you get the funds back. I think that's really interesting in a world in which we want to minimize custody. Then there are technologies I know DCI has been really involved in, like discrete log contracts, Taj being one of the creators of this. And those are ways to have a layer to, say, synthetic assets or derivatives or financial products. So we're seeing uses around that. Desiree, our VP of Business Operations at Lightning Labs, is really involved in the Lightning gaming world. We have a bunch of really cool startups, especially as people are stuck at home. Gaming has taken off in interesting ways. There is ZBD, Donner Labs, Satoshi's Games, and a variety of other companies. They have Mint Gox, not to be confused with Mt. Gox, which is an online gaming tournament. So we've seen, Lightning Chat is one that I've mentioned quite a few times recently. People are actually sending chat messages over the Lightning Network. They have to pay like 1 sat to chat. And it's interesting the psychological dynamics that go along with that, because if you have to pay, you're probably not going to be as likely to spam somebody. And then things come full circle because, of course, you have Hashcash, Adam Back's work that Satoshi used that originated in terms of anti-spam. But at a very high level, we're seeing all these new and interesting use cases emerge. One that I'm really excited about and passionate about is the use of this technology around the world in emerging markets in the developing world. For example, I've been chatting with some of the organizers in the Venezuelan community, especially one named Anabel Crypto, virtually, speaking in English translated to Spanish. I can understand a bit of what they say. And really hearing about the needs of these communities. I have a lot of friends in Argentina and other places in South America. And to just see that, locally, what is going on right now in these economies, they have capital controls. They have crazy inflation. Even Argentina, which was seen as relatively stable, all things considered, right now there is the government rate that's half at what the street exchange rate is, and there's some really interesting dynamics going on there. So there's actually a guy named Matt Alberg. Definitely suggest checking out his research. He looks at Bitcoin generally in the developing world, in emerging markets. Africa is another big area of interest for him. And to me, ultimately, the goal with Lightning is to make this technology global, to enable people to transact instantly around the world with very low fees. So I'm really excited to see what's emerging. For example, Stack, the company I mentioned, is big in the Philippines. And you have this international nature of people being able to both send and then earn money using Bitcoin on Lightning. And that's not to say, by the way, that what's going on, here in the US, especially, this past weekend and the past week, that it's been really disheartening to see. And we can debate the merits of everything with Bitcoin and Lightning, but at the end of the day, if you think about human rights activists, people not wanting to be surveilled, Alex Gladstein's done a lot of really great work around that over at the Human Rights Foundation, and enabling greater privacy enabling, the freedom to transact and not be surveilled, I think is really important right now in the world moving forward.
Definitely, for sure. I think the idea of a money-based surveillance state is really scary. Like we already have an information database one, and opening that up to our financial transactions even further is a dystopia we do not want to enter. It could make things so much worse. Yeah, and thanks for acknowledging what's happening out there right now. I think a lot of us are watching and trying to figure out what we can do and how we can help. And I do believe that the work that we're doing has something to do with making a more fair financial system and helping people. So cool. Okay. Well, I've always wanted to ask you this, which is, we got together in that vegan restaurant and we're talking, and you've been working on this for 4 years, and now in 2020, what has anything surprised you? Looking back, did you expect things would turn out the way that they did? Or what has been most surprising to you?
Well, I'll say one. So this is a little bit minor, but one of the things that surprised me was feeding chickens. And by the way, Elaine O spearheaded that with feeding birds, Pollo Feed. But you work in this technology and you foresee all these really interesting use cases that you never thought would be possible. And like feeding chickens online with Lightning wasn't one of them. But at the end of the day, I see that as this kind of, you never know what people are going to do with the technology when you put it out there. And if you look at something like Wikipedia, did the creators of the internet think there would be, this global encyclopedia that anybody could edit around the world? And turns out it's actually quite accurate, and it, is not constantly vandalized. And Jimmy Wales, founder of Wikipedia, old friend of mine, and lots of Wikipedian friends within the community. So that's all to say that there were a lot of use cases, Satoshi's Place, things like that emerged that where you could pay 1 Satoshi per pixel. And, they seem trivial, and in some ways they are trivial, but to me that I believe we will see, the Wikipedias to come. And one other important point is, in terms of the Lightning community, today, many of, for example, LND and many of the nodes do still have limits in place. We wanted to take a security first approach. This was not the scenario of go all in there and put all your money on the Lightning Network. Plus, in terms of, say, capital on the network, you actually can transact more. So one of our devs, Alex Bosworth, posted that recently his node actually transacted more than the funds that were on his node, because you can send that money over and over again. We didn't quite get into it today, but the theme of Lightning liquidity is one that I'm really interested in terms of capital allocation. Definitely a subject for a future discussion. But I would say, in terms of the weird and unexpected use cases, that certainly surprised me, but also the speed of community adoption, the number of startups that emerged, really as Mainnet came out. And, just in the past few weeks, I've heard of a lot of Lightning startups getting funding in the post-COVID world, which is really exciting, because the whole goal is to build this new economy, to build this technology that others can use for real use cases with real users, where they can solve real problems for the world. And to see that emerge has really been, exciting and heartening, especially with all the, the broader macro climate, and really hoping that we can use the technology to enable good in the world.
Yeah, I think, the one thing that surprised me and that I didn't expect is finally realizing that sort of the speed of development and what it is a feature and not a bug. Things going relatively slowly and it taking a while to get major changes in and to get things reviewed. That is the way that it should be when you're building.
But then on layer 2, we can go faster, and we've just seen.
Yeah, exactly. But you gotta get the base layer right.
And I had this tweet from 2014 where I said, nobody's built the HTTP yet for Bitcoin. And then I realized, years later, I found the tweet and I was like, wow, this is what we're doing with Lightning. So I can't wait to see what people build. I think this is only the beginning.
Yeah, and now we have leaving guitar. So hi, Ryan. We can't hear you at all. You're on mute.
A muted guitar, the best guitar, because I'm rusty.
We can just stream some micropayments to you for your guitar playing with Lightning.
There we go.
Exactly. Well, maybe my guitar lesson's more like it. Thank you both so much for this conversation.